WandaVision is the best thing Marvel and Disney have ever made and likely ever will. I get this sounds a bit dramatic, and also realize I'm a bit late to the party, since depending on when you're watching this, the first episode of The Falcon and The Winter Soldier may have already been put out, and you, together with the entire world of media-consuming goblins, will have moved on to pay attention to the next thing for a while. But I don't want to let go of WandaVision quite yet. WandaVision is shown as a glimpse of a reality quite different than our own, not just the characters. And I can only dream about the endless, beautiful possibilities inside. Or, well, make a video about it. So why don't you join me and learn it all? In this video, we'll discuss what elevates WandaVision far beyond what the superhero genre is usually known for, and what makes it all come crashing down again, ensuring that we may never see anything like it ever again. Before we get into the show itself, it might be a good idea to have a bit of a history lesson. And trust me, even if you're already familiar with these characters, what I say now will be talked about again later. So let's get you up to speed chronologically. Both Wanda and Vision first appeared in Avengers Age of Ultron, the now rather despised sequel to the first Avengers movie. Wanda's parents died during the American bombing of their home country, Sokovia, barely surviving together with her brother Pietro out of sheer luck of a Stark missile not exploding, fueling their hatred for Tony Stark and making them later join the terrorist organization Hydra and developing superpowers thanks to the Mind Stone, one of the Infinity Stones, which derive from the Big Bang and holds the entire power of the universe inside. In the movie, she is first an enemy of the Avengers until she joins them to put an end to Ultron, which she is in part responsible for creating, at the cost of the life of her brother. While I still enjoy this movie to this day, the problems Wanda's character is introduced with will continue to riddle her for every single forthcoming movie. First and foremost, visually, her character is an absolute nightmare and would continue to be just that up until very recently. She wears weird gowns and coats, goth makeup, paints her nails black, has hairstyles coming straight from the early 2000s. They probably wanted to convey her youth, sadness, and discontent with the world, but fell flat on their face through it. But the more important issues lie below the surface, and they aren't even necessarily the movie maker's fault. The Scarlet Witch, just like so many other comic book characters, is the victim of an era in which writing a backstory meant piling heaps and heaps of traumatic events onto someone without ever wanting to address any of it or think about what it might mean for the character itself. Lest we forget that Spider-Man was at one point the victim of multiple cases of sexual assault, just because the writers thought that might make him more interesting. The Scarlet Witch's story was never changed back much from this period, so when she was introduced in the MCU, her troubled story stuck. Aside from the fact that a person with the deeply rooted caliber of her trauma should never be made to fight alongside the Avengers as what is basically a superpowered soldier, and would actually be barely able to function for months, being overwhelmed by grief, her identity as a Sokovian never given any discernible weight. This is simply because at the time, the entire MCU was very much Tony Stark's story. So her, and by extension her entire nation of birth, were just another gateway to make him feel bad about his past, without any of the real animosity or bite that would stem from such a tense relationship. She never really gets any closure with Stark. In fact, with it all just being superhero movies, we need the big dramatic moments without any tangible consequences. The entire issue at hand gets treated in a hand-waved manner, with the message ultimately being, yes, Tony's weapons helped murder thousands in Sokovia, but Wanda was also a bit evil once. The same movie sees the creation of Vision, a being both human and robot with powerful abilities fueled by the Mind Stone. Remember that? implanted in his head. He should have been Ultron's new body before the upload failed. He is a character both all-knowing and naive, both immensely powerful and sugary innocent. Unfortunately, his characterization spells further doom for the both of them, as he doesn't amount to more than a robot that likes to spew philosophical phrases. Back then, superhero movies were also, let's face it, extremely sexist. And Wanda is more or less sidelined to just occasionally give Vision a scared yet horny look while he displays powers far beyond what we've seen at that point. At the end of the movie, she gets a painfully cringy scene in which she rips out the heart of Ultron's main body in order to make him feel what she felt when he killed her brother. Okay, so Ultron is just a machine. As much as Joss Whedon or whoever thought this was a cool scene, he doesn't feel pain. He doesn't even have a heart. And in fact, the guy in the scene isn't even Ultron himself. He is an AI capable of inhabiting thousands of bodies at once. At this point in the story, he even has about tens of other Ultrons flying about the place. It is, of course, Vision who gets the final kill on Ultron's last body, so that they may have a pseudo-philosophical exchange on the nature of humanity. This approach essentially ruining the scene for both. Damn! Women really weren't allowed to have shit back then. Well, anyway, Vision and Wanda grow closer over the span of the next movies, and different than the other tragic attempts at romance in the MCU, they somehow work rather well together. They are an extremely weird couple, of course, a living android with the power of an aspect of the universe and a telekinetic East European witch, but there seems to be some mutual understanding between them. They both don't know neither their limits nor the nature of their power, and struggle with their identity, loneliness, as well as the fight to preserve the innocence they have left. It is clear, though, that the writers, even more than with Vision, have no idea what to do with Wanda. In the comics, she is powerful on the scale of actual gods, but the MCU needs her to be an inconsequential side character. So, under the excuse of her simply not knowing how to use her powers, she is limited to doing some funny hand motions and, being subjected to even more trauma, as she accidentally kills a bunch of people at the start of the third Captain America movie, sparking a civil war between heroes. This conflict splits up the Avengers, weakening them when Thanos attacks. Wanda is then forced to destroy the Mind Stone inside Vision's head, killing him, before Thanos rewinds time and kills him himself in order to retrieve it. She then fights Thanos in the next movie, almost tearing him apart, for the first time displaying powers akin to those she has in the comics.
That's the history lesson done. Before we move on, I'd like for you to keep in mind that Vision's death is one of the few permanent consequences in the MCU, since Loki is getting a new show this summer and Black Widow got a movie 6 years ago? What? It's still not out? WandaVision's premise, then, is inherently interesting for MCU fans. The first trailers, just like the start of the series, show us Wanda and Vision living a happy life as a couple in the 1950s. In black and white, as a sitcom. Now, if you're not totally gullible, you'll soon notice that something is wrong here. Vision, first and foremost, shouldn't be alive. But the viewer isn't the only one noticing something weird. Both Wanda and Vision don't know how they got here, or seem to remember anything before the day they moved to Westview, New Jersey. And so the first 2 episodes are spent on setup, and the shenanigans the couple encounters while trying to hide their powers from the others in order to fit in. Here already, I don't really get the common consensus that the first 2 episodes are boring. Because if anything, they might be the most well executed. Every scene in these 20-minute shorts serves a purpose, either hinting at a perhaps more sinister explanation to the sitcom reality, a character's intentions, who is controlling who, where everyone is, and what is really going on. If not, there is some great classic sitcom humor to be found. I never laughed out loud, but none of the jokes were aggressively bad or unfunny. Especially when you look at the more darker implications and references behind them. Like my husband and his indestructible head. The effects are also stellar, and do an amazing job of transmitting the main character's powers and how they might have been done in old visual effects styles. All this without ever looking cheap. The homages stay consistently high quality. The entire production always looks expensive and elaborate. The scenes in which the sitcom reality breaks are genuinely creepy and build up some great potential for some fan theories here. Characters seem to be prohibited from questioning the sitcom reality and will be violently forced to shut up. Scenes will cut abruptly or even be entirely rewound. What becomes more and more clear is that, at least in part, it seems to be Wanda's doing. This entire TV show a giant distraction from Vision's untimely passing. We are also introduced to Wanda's neighbor and dear friend Agnes, as well as new in town Geraldine. By the third episode, she is inexplicably pregnant, while the passing of time takes us from sitcom era to sitcom era to... All the while, the pregnancy progresses over the span of just one day. Geraldine helps Wanda deliver her babies, while Vision fetches the doctor who was supposed to go on vacation, but mentions small towns being simply too hard to escape. Can relate. Oh. After a bone-chilling scene in which Wanda sings in Sokovian to her newborn and talks to Geraldine in her old accent, the former remembers the real world and mentions the death of Wanda's brother. The furious Wanda banishes her from Westview by launching her away in one swift motion. Talk about a plot twist, am I right? Talk about a plot twist, am I right? Now that's what I call a home run. From this point on, the show's structure changes. Thanks to Geraldine, who in reality is Monica Rambeau, we can see that WandaVision is merely a fictional TV show emanating from the radiation from Westview, New Jersey, where Wanda seems to have created a giant field in which only her sitcom reality can exist. From this point on, the show is full of jaw-dropping surprises, heartfelt emotions, and most importantly, soul, as the world both inside and out tries to make sense of the situation. Crucially, for the first time in Marvel history, the characters are finally allowed to come alive. Thanks to WandaVision's extended runtime, clocking in at over 90 minutes longer than the longest Marvel movie, characters are allowed to be confused, misunderstand each other. The hurt they feel is genuinely transmitted by there being consequences and changes in their behavior. While Monica's actress Teyonah Parris is great, and I appreciate her effort, she tries to bring superhero bombast desperately into every scene, and it doesn't really fit, since that's never really what the script demands. This series doubles down as her superhero origin story, and while her journey towards it is one of overcoming personal weaknesses, it is far more unique and tied to Wanda's own journey perfectly. It is exactly this smaller scale, more personal approach that makes this series' impact so much grander. Yes, I knew that what happens here would go on to influence the Marvel Universe for years to come, but what really got me hooked is the mystery and emotions themselves. Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, respectively, finally get to show off the acting talents they've kept hidden in the MCU for so many years. Olsen especially gives an award-winning performance. She will effortlessly switch between sitcom homage, funny banter, silly mother, unbridled grief, and even just being plain scary and threatening, sometimes all in the same scene. Not only does this finally align her with the imposing presence of her comic book counterpart, but it also makes Wanda probably the first morally grey character in the franchise. For the first half of the series, she even is straight up the villain. Wanda will hurt people and show little to no remorse, blinded by her love for her resurrected husband. This is never taken to such extremes as a show like The Boys, which is still the best superhero show of all times, but it manages to strike a great balance between the bubbly, hyper-positivity of the usual MCU and the dark, hyper-grim and black morality of The Boys. And speaking of oversimplification, the show itself is also very clearly tired of the concept of villains themselves. Yes, towards the end, there are people with much more sinister intentions than Wanda's, but they aren't monsters. Agnes is revealed to actually be Agatha Harkness, an ancient witch that came to Westview only after Wanda's supreme display of power, and sees her as an extreme danger to all of reality, wanting to first understand Wanda and then drain her of her power. She is mischievous and bitter, but ultimately still sympathetic towards her, as she knows how much Wanda has suffered. Then there is Tyler Hayward. Well, an absolute piece of shit, all he wants to do is secure that Vision's corpse may not be used as a weapon against America by weaponizing him himself. So through all of this muddled morality and these multifaceted characters, WandaVision is spinning quite a lot of plates. But does so beautifully. Every minute of the show is incredibly engaging and nerve-wracking, as you truly never know what will happen right around the corner. All of this, again, is achieved without a single action scene, up until the very last episode. There are moments of violence, but the emotional weight and intention behind them is always prevalent, and clearly the reason as to why it is shown. Making me not really ever miss the way the MCU used to do action scenes, especially because the effects are still so amazingly done. Let's not forget that Vision's body and face are almost entirely done by effects, and he looks amazing. In addition to this, the show is also rather brave with the characters it introduces. Wanda's son, Billy, is not only one of the most important and most powerful characters in the Marvel Comics, but he is also gay, in a way that is relevant and important to his own story, as he and his husband are essential Marvel characters. Introducing Wanda's twin sons therefore locks Marvel into an inevitable collision path in which they will have to figure out how to handle these stories in the future for countries like China. WandaVision also introduces the additional element of Evan Peters as Quicksilver, playing Wanda's brother from another reality, the X-Men movies. And yet, while this does sound bonkers, what shines through at the end are the character moments and subtleties in conversations. This all combined into achieving a near impossible feat. The Marvel world feeling alive, vibrant, evolving, and engaging. And with me finally being able to connect with Wanda on an emotional basis, thanks to her finally behaving and breathing like a living person, I cried for the first time in a long while watching a TV show. In episode 8, the entire weight of Wanda's trauma and experiences, her crushing grief and loss, came not only crashing down on her, but on me as well. This character that hasn't been done justice in almost 10 years, who has been constantly shoved to the side and subjected to more hurt, had finally come alive in front of my eyes, together with the realization of being the titular Scarlet Witch. Tears ran down my face at the exact same moment she started crying. Everything was set into place for a truly magical finale. What? Should I do it again? You want me to... Tears ran down my face. At the exact same time she started crying. Everything was put into place for a truly magical finale! And then the spell was broken. Watching the last episode of WandaVision is a truly bizarre experience. It feels like a completely different show, and also straight up turns into a Dragon Ball Z episode for half its runtime. Fully equipped with crazy flying around CGI effects, exaggerated explosions, lasers, and throwing people through walls. It doesn't come out of left field. From episode 1 on, it was always clear that all of this would eventually lead up to a more traditional Marvel ending fight. And yet, I never thought I'd actually say this, but the fight scenes in this Marvel movie feel like a waste of time. They are spectacular, but since pure spectacle was never the point of this show, it all feels separated from the plot. While I certainly can excuse pacing issues and forgotten plot lines to a certain degree, after all, there was way too much left to clear up, I can't excuse how sterilized and all of a sudden soulless it all feels. I don't have any insight in the writing process of the show, so all of this is just speculation, but in many ways it seems the writers were given a bunch of toys to play with that they all had to put down again at the end of the show in order to appease the corporate overlords. An example of what I'm talking about is both probably the worst scene and the worst joke in the history of Marvel Entertainment. The aforementioned introduction of Quicksilver from the X-Men universe, and no, I'm not here to discuss if it was actually supposed to be him. It clearly was, and according to rumors, it was changed at some point. Culminates in the reveal of him just being some guy named Ralph Boner. One of the most interesting and mysterious plotlines is given up for the worst dick joke I've ever heard. This, unfortunately, sets the tone for what the entire episode is trying to do. The interconnectivity of the Marvel Universe, the thing me and many others love so much about it, seems to desperately try to choke the life out of WandaVision to normalize events again. It turns out that the military was now able to weaponize the Vision's corpse thanks to Wanda's magic, which attacks her and her family. However, the Vision Wanda created in her own reality restores the other Vision's memories, making him fly off in confusion. Look, this is in line with comics. In certain plotlines, Vision dies and is rebuilt in a white Vision form, without his former personality and emotions. But at this point in the MCU, Vision has died a collective amount of 3 times. Can we really just not let him stay dead for once? It's just tiring at this point, it really is. Plus, it fully undermines and sours the entire point of the show. Wanda going through the stages of grief and eventually letting Vision go. Next up, instead of giving us hints on what all the characters we actually liked in the show will be up to next, we get a near meaningless end credits scene teasing Monica's appearance in Captain Marvel 2. We already know she would be there. It's obvious. What are Darcy and Jimmy Woo doing? You know, the characters the show actually made us care about? Wanda's kids also disappear together with her husband, for now, at least. While other young Avengers are already getting their own TV shows and movie appearances to set up their eventual team-up, the only gay one gets suspiciously fridged until Marvel figures out what to do with him and his brother over the next years. Alrighty then. All this might sound harsh, or even nitpicky, and I must admit, I'm not really mad. I just honestly wish the show about Vision's death didn't, you know, revive Vision. One thing that the last episode doesn't manage to ever drag down is the raw power in Wanda fully embracing her identity as the Scarlet Witch. As someone who, for years, has been exhausted with trying to do the right thing and be a hero while others were terrified and hateful towards her, that relationship is finally strained until it breaks in this show. Wanda is not a hero, and she doesn't want to be. The show, even in the last episode, dares to portray her as a dark and resentful human being that mentally tortured and controlled an entire city over the span of weeks. She isn't heartless, she knows what she did is wrong, but she realizes she doesn't owe this world any explanations and apologies anymore, as her chance to ever get kindness in return has long passed. The last thing Monica Rambeau says to her is especially meaningful. They'll never know what you sacrificed for them. Indeed, the only chance for a normal life Wanda ever had was the direct cause of unbearable pain to others. This doesn't change the weight of her sacrifice, however, and shows that even as her powers near that of godhood evermore, she is still capable of empathizing. Where the show deviates from the comics is in Catherine Hahn's Agatha. While usually a mentor for Wanda, she assumes the role of a more villainous figure, harshly, but very usefully, introducing Wanda to the world of magic and her prophesized role as the Scarlet Witch, harbinger of chaos. But while at first this new role seems to reduce and oversimplify a rather complex character, it does wonders for the Scarlet Witch's current position in their story. A mentor figure only works as an extension of the figure they are mentoring. And at the end of this series, Wanda doesn't need any more guidance. She has found herself, and while alone, she isn't lonely. As she says to the vision she has created, and this notion is echoed throughout the whole show, the love she feels for her family is real, and she will carry all the grief, hope, and most of all love with her for the rest of her life. I do hope that we get to see more of Hahn's Agatha in the future though, as the performance was absolutely flawless. Also, before we get to my conclusion, complete side note, but I don't understand the common criticism that the more emotional dialogues in the show were extremely cringy. Like, I've seen Vision's quote, "What is grief if not love persevering," memed the hell out of on Twitter, as if y'all wouldn't have loved this same sentence if it was put into an indie movie. And look, I get it, I love indie movies too, but let's not act as if the writing was somehow horrible or worse just because it's a Marvel product. Like, sorry that Marvel tried to do something a little more different and emotional this one time, and y'all found it so unbearable because her evil company. Guess what? 99% of all things you interact with day by day are either made or owned by an evil company. Ahem. In conclusion, WandaVision is a wonderful piece of art that not even its tone-deaf last episode and a whole lot of corporate meddling managed to drag down. Its exploration of underdeveloped characters and adult perspective on grief through the lens of a superhero world is a delight, and is sure to fascinate and inspire audiences for years to come. However, more than a spell, it casts a curse over the next few years of the MCU. On a more personal note, this show came into my life at a time where I was unsure of how to express and explore a love that was blooming in my life. And a bit like Wanda herself, I was scared of being vulnerable, and I tried to portray myself as being a little stronger and a little bit more perfect than I actually am. But just like the show progressed, my life too changed when I started to let go of that ideal I had of myself and embraced my vulnerability, my imperfections, and, well, reality. It wasn't hard, it wasn't harsh. If anything, it felt liberating. Just like its tagline, it does present us with a love like we've never seen. A love story transcending lifetimes, timelines, even realities. It comes with high expectations in plot, themes, acting, and cinematography, raising the bar unreachably high for creators to come. It also shows a glimpse into a world where Marvel Studios forgets the studio's part for a bit, and focuses on delivering an emotionally resonating and coherent story. While this illusion ultimately breaks in the end, it leaves us with formation of the most developed, complex, and interesting character in the entire franchise. which, just like in her best Marvel tales, both on a meta level and an interior one, is destined to either guide or ruin this universe. Which one it'll be, I don't know yet. But won't it be fun to find out?